All right, let's get right into it. We're talking about a fundamental choice in software design, monolithic versus microservices architecture. And trust me, this is one of those decisions that can literally define how a company grows, innovates, and even survives.
And this whole conversation really starts with a classic problem of success. Back in 2009, Netflix was just exploding, but their infrastructure, the very foundation of their service, just couldn't handle the load. Their own success was literally about to break them, and that forced them to make a radical and, at the time, pretty revolutionary change.
So, to really get why their solution was so groundbreaking, we first have to understand the problem they were running away from. And that problem has a name: monolithic architecture.
Okay, so what is a monolith? The easiest way to think about it is like a single, self-contained building. Every single function, from user logins to streaming the video to handling your credit card, it's all housed under one roof, running from one massive single code base.
Now you might be thinking, that sounds kind of messy, but for a long, long time, this was the standard way to build software. And for a really good reason. It's simple to get started, you've got one code base, which makes building it, testing it, and deploying it super straightforward. If you're a startup trying to get off the ground, that speed is a huge, huge advantage.
But, and this is the big but that Netflix ran into, that initial strength becomes a massive weakness when you start to scale. As the monolith gets bigger, development slows to a crawl. You can't just upgrade one part, you have to redeploy the whole thing. And the scariest part, a single bug in one tiny feature can bring the entire system crashing down.
It was this exact problem, this scaling bottleneck, that led to the rise of a totally new way of thinking: microservices. This was the escape hatch that Netflix pioneered to solve its growth crisis. I love this analogy for the shift. It's like going from managing one well-behaved child, that's your monolith, to running an entire chaotic but dynamic preschool classroom. Yeah, it's way more complex, but each kid is independent. You just have to make sure they're all playing nicely together.
So what does that really mean? Well, instead of that one giant all-in-one application, you now have a collection of tiny, specialized services. Each one does just one job and does it well. You have one for user accounts, another for search, another for payments, and they all communicate with each other to create the final application.
And this diagram here really helps it all click. You see all the individual services at the bottom? Well, requests come in through a single front door called a gateway. And then something called a registry acts like a traffic cop, directing each request to the right little service. They're separate, but they're coordinated.
This table basically gives you the perfect cheat sheet for the trade-offs. Monolith: one code base, one deployment. Microservices: many code bases, you deploy and scale each service on its own. And that last row, fault isolation, that's the real game changer. If the payment service goes down, your users can still browse and search for movies. One failure doesn't cause a total system meltdown.
Okay, so at this point, you're probably thinking, microservices, it's a no-brainer. But hold on. The story isn't quite that simple. We really need to do a reality check, because when you dig into the raw performance data, things get, well, complicated. Yeah, so while pretty much everyone assumes that breaking an app into smaller pieces makes it faster, some recent studies have shown that's not always true. In fact, there's some pretty surprising data out there.
So, in one really important study, they put both architectures to the test with up to 7,000 simultaneous users. And the result? It was basically a tie. The performance difference was less than 1%. Not exactly what you'd expect, right?
Okay, but then the researchers changed things up. They ran what's called a concurrency test, which is basically like creating a digital traffic jam, hitting every single part of the system with a massive wave of requests all at the exact same time. And that's when the results got really interesting.
The monolith, the old-school architecture, actually performed better. On average, it handled 6% more requests per second. And why is that? Well, all that network chatter between the different microservices, it adds up. It creates a tiny bit of overhead that, under extreme stress, can actually slow things down, letting the all-in-one monolith pull ahead.
And that surprising performance data really hammers home a critical point. Switching to microservices isn't some magic fix. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And it is a complex journey with some serious challenges along the way.
Companies that make the leap run into some major hurdles. You get this thing called development sprawl, where suddenly you have 100 different services and nobody knows what they all do. Managing data can be a nightmare. And debugging? Oh man, trying to trace a single user's request across 10 different services is like being a detective trying to solve a crime that happened in 10 different cities at once. It's a huge technical and cultural shift.
So how do you do it right? Well, the experts all agree you go slow. You absolutely avoid a risky all-at-once rewrite. Instead, you use this brilliant strategy called the Strangler Fig Pattern. Think of it like a vine that slowly grows over and replaces an old tree. You gradually build new microservices around the old monolith piece by piece until the original system is just gone. You move one service at a time, using safe deployment techniques to minimize any risk.
So, after weighing the pros, the cons, the surprising performance data, and all the challenges of migration, what's the big takeaway here? What does this all mean?
It brings us right back to where we started. That one central question: for your project, for your company, which path do you choose?
And the answer, as it so often is in tech, is it depends. There is no one-size-fits-all solution. A monolith is often the perfect choice for a small team or a startup where speed to market is everything. But if you're a massive, complex system like Netflix or Amazon, you absolutely need the flexibility, the resilience, and the scalability that microservices provide.
Because at the end of the day, this choice is so much bigger than just code. It shapes how your teams are structured, how your company collaborates, and how you're able to innovate in the future. So the real question you have to ask is, are you building a speedboat to get somewhere fast? Or are you building an aircraft carrier that's designed to last and evolve for the next decade? That's the choice.